Yeah, how was that? If we could just briefly talk about that. I mean, right now there's a lot of media around Twiga and their potential issues.
I think I'm gonna enjoy this just as much as I enjoyed my last trip to the dentist. Huh? It was a great experience. I was part of the founding team, and we had to build what people say from 0 to 1. There was no product, so it's very similar to what we're doing at Exodus now. And thinking through what are the right interventions. And so I started at the bottom, building it from when we didn't have any revenue. As you're trying to get product market fit, the ideal scenario is to a little bit be more like the Mindy. To really bootstrap, because it focuses the mind. What does my customer actually want, and what they're willing to pay for? But in reality, it's hard to do that when there's a surplus of capital available. It's easy to rationalize raising around and putting money in your company and having that comfort, because at the end of the day, the challenge for the entrepreneur or the founder is, I'm convincing people to come on this journey with me, to work for my company and build this company. I want to give them the best possible chance of success. And capital is one of those advantages. So I'm not going to turn away from capital, but how do you accept it, but still maintain that mindset that, I want to make money from my customer. So that's really the challenging balance for any founder. Or in terms of founders generally, or
founders, companies, like you mentioned a few, like Bastigo, Rome,
they're more
they are more foreign.
It's I have a view on this that is going to hurt some feelings. Look, I think I give people the context of when I started in Twiga. Those were very different days. If you raised $150,000, you are in business daily. It was a whole feature. If you are a startup founder now, there's expectations to raise significantly more, and you need analogies to do that. And so we're trying to help the new age of founders, successful founders, to come to arise, and so then investors can see, okay, Kenyans can actually build world-class businesses.
So you're also a VC?
I wouldn't say so, but I would say more, me and a couple of friends, we tend to look at ourselves more as like, I would say, thinking about it more like a venture studio. We try and be as helpful as we can.
We call that the Twiga Mafia.
It's not a mafia. It's not a mafia. No one has been threatened.
There is like the PayPal Mafia, where the founding team at PayPal, they left and built other great companies. I think Elon Musk was part of it too.
And then David Sachs and Reid Hoffman or Peter Thiel. Okay, I hear what you're saying.
So those the patterns we're seeing here.
The Twiga, but I love it.
Hey, welcome back. Today we'll be discussing electric vehicles, so EV. It's the biggest buzzword at the moment. It took me some time to find a Black African person to come and speak about this, to be honest. I am very excited. I think we'll start with intros. We'll start with a returning person.
Chris, as always.
Chris, and then over to you.
Kikonde from Exodus.
Kikonde from Exodus. Cool. Who's Exodus?
Good question. So Exodus started off as a company trying to figure out public transportation. I think we all live in this city, and we know how annoying public transport can be. Or we think it's annoying, but it's the form of transport that, depending on whatever statistic you look at, anywhere between 48% and 60% of Nairobians use public transport. Right? So it's the most common used form of transport. It's highly fragmented. So I think in Nairobi there's something like 600 registered SACCOs to run public transport. About 270 of those are active.
Okay.
It's designed so that it can support the entire Nairobi, but it is entirely private. So there is no public funds used in public transport, which is great in a sense because no one is taxed to finance this transport system. But the problem now is with that level of fragmentation, obviously the quality has gone down. People complain about a lot of issues in the public transport industry, cultural issues. I think for women, we found that 3/4 of women who've used public transport say they've been
harassed.
Sexually
it's true.
harassed on public transport. And so there was a quality area that we wanted to look at. People complain about drug abuse in public transport as well. I think something in the region of 60% of people have witnessed drivers and conductors using some form of...
Until it's high.
Let's call them stimulants. And so there are so many issues. It's very layered. And so when Exodus really started, the thinking was, we don't really know where we need to intervene. But I'm coming from having run a fairly large business, Twiga at the time, and having run its operations and also worked a lot on tech products with the company. My thought was, well, the only way to really learn is to deploy vehicles and actually operate. And then over time, figure out where can technology actually play a role in organizing the public transport industry. So we were agnostic, actually, to begin with. As Exodus, we never came in and thought, this is actually our play. We're going to do this, and then this is also going to solve.
Disrupt the public transport.
That's a D word. It should be avoided at all times. But the thinking for us was, what's the product that you can actually use to intervene in this industry that is actually going to make a difference? And is actually going to add value for the people who actually use public transport. So we deployed an electric bus because we thought that was cool.
You thought it was cool?
We thought it was cool.
Okay.
So we decided, if we're going to do this, then let's not, what do they say in Kiswahili? If you're going to eat the pig, don't spare the tail. So we went all out and we deployed the technology. We had our own internal technology to manage our operations. We had a great partnership, which we still do, with one of the major operators. And we deployed the bus and we operated across, I think, 12 major routes across Nairobi, which is basically covering all of Nairobi and the metropolitan area. And what we wanted to understand, as I mentioned, was just, where does actually technology product come in and solve for public transport? And that's how we got into the EV space. So we stumbled upon it like a drunk in a bar, not necessarily some sort of design, great design principle behind it. But let's just put the bus there, let's have passengers use it, and then we can figure out where we can actually intervene. So we did that for a few months, and we learned a lot. Ironically, it was profitable to do that, at least at a gross margin level. And we learned about what many of the challenges were. Key things that, and I think we'll go into it in this conversation, was we were testing so many things. We're trying to figure out things like price elasticity. Now, just to explain what that means, we're trying to figure out how much more people willing to pay
to be on electric,
to be on a nice bus, and so on. We learned a good lesson from that.
And how much are they willing more to pay to? Nothing exactly.
So that was good. So we had to figure out the cost structure and all that, just to figure out how to make it profitable. And so that's how we stumbled upon it. So Exodus really is now is largely focused on software as a service for the public transport industry. And what we're trying to do is build tools that enable the industry essentially formalize and be able to aggregate and do many of the things that are valuable to residents, to users, in a way that allows them to also self-regulate, because that was the whole point in building SACCOs.
Yes, exactly.
The whole idea was for them to self-regulate, and there is very little technology in the space to help them do that. And what we observed is many of the SACCOs, the reason why we have so much disaggregation is many of them, without technology, are essentially unable to go or scale beyond 300 buses.
Okay.
Because they have so many individual owners, Wangari decides to put a bus there, and Chris decides to also put his bus. And you get to 100, 200 people.
Yeah, that's
too chaotic.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of people getting very upset. So we decided that's where we're going to be. We're going to try and add a lot of value.
Okay.
And yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Great intro. You touched on something very briefly. You are one of the founders of Twiga.
Yes. It depends on who you ask.
It depends on who you ask. What?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. Some people will say, I'm not really obsessed with titles in that way. Some people will say I was a co-founder. Some people will say I was a founding CEO. There's always some founding element to that. Yeah, but I was part of the founding team of Twiga amongst a lot of other very, very brilliant people that I worked with. And so some people will say founder, co-founder, but I'm just content to say I was part of founding management.
Yeah, and part of the team. And how was that? If we could just briefly talk about that. I mean, right now there's a lot of media around Twiga and their potential issues.
I think I'm going to enjoy this just as much as I enjoyed my last trip to the dentist. It was a great experience. I was part of the founding team, and we had to build what people say from 0 to 1. Mm-hmm. There was no product, so it's very similar to what we're doing at Exodus now. Mm-hmm. And thinking through what are the right interventions. And so I started at the bottom, building it from when we didn't have any revenue, trying to figure out how to match small-scale farmers with small-scale traders and what role we're going to play in the middle. Yeah. So I did that for close to 8 years. 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was my experience. Twiga was a great learning experience. It was the MBA of MBAs in terms of running a startup, because we got both experiences. We ran an early stage business. Yeah. When there was no product, when there was no ideal outcome we wanted, and then we actually built it to something that by the time I was exiting, the company was probably doing annual revenue run rates of close to $200 million. So that was great. Of course, it's everyone knows what's of course happening in the markets now. It's very challenging. I try and give some perspective and be a bit philosophical about it, but the reality is, if you go even to the international markets, if you look at what people call growth stocks in the US, in the stock markets, we've seen huge dips in value. And so a lot of effort has been put to try and create value. But at the same time, as you're trying to achieve that, obviously there was a lot of pressure for people to grow the companies. Yeah. And now there's a lot of pressure to get them towards profitability. Mm-hmm. So it's natural that that's going to happen. Of course, Twiga hasn't been left out of that. We all have to take our medicine. And I think, I'm still a shareholder that I still feel a sense of meaning and value in the company, and a sense of ownership. So right now, of course, it's tough, but it's a resilient team. I worked with some brilliant people there. Many of them are still there, and I'm pretty confident that they're going to figure it out. Okay. It's a challenge for the whole ecosystem. Some will not survive, unfortunately, but I think many will and will be better for it.
And your bet is Twiga will survive this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to be. Maybe I sound like a Man United, like a Gary Neville or something. But yeah, I mean, of course, I'm biased. Yeah. It's something that we built. So I'm going to have that prejudice as someone who was there. And, there are a lot of people I care about who are still there. I don't want it to fail, obviously. So all of that informs my bias. I'm blatantly and unrepentantly
hoping and praying.
Not hoping and praying. I'm prejudiced towards it, towards the company, and I think ultimately, in my view, they're going to be better for it. I think like most companies that will go through this downturn, I always try and remind people the internet bubble of the early 2000s in the US yielded very good companies after.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going to happen.
And wiped a lot.
Companies too. There was a lot of value destruction, but a lot of companies that rose from like phoenixes from the ashes of that bubble are some legendary companies today.
Okay.
So you are, so you could say you're a serial entrepreneur. From Twiga.
I don't like that characterization.
But other people would say, why not exit and go to Watamu and buy a villa and wake up and swim and live the rest of your life?
No, I think there's always that temptation. And we all indulge ourselves a little bit.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think when I left, Twiga was a very intense environment. It was not an easy environment to operate in. We had lots of people. I think the time I left, we had over 1,000 employees. That's since reduced. Because I was running operations, a lot of those people were under my keep, if I can put it that way. They were in my house and I was managing them. And so that was a very intense and it required a lot of passion to run that kind of business. And so obviously when you leave, the temptation is to chill and of course I also got that pressure to relax. But then what was interesting is that because it was very intense, it was also almost like a bubble.
Yeah.
Right. So you leave and then you start engaging people and you start to see what people are doing, what people are developing. And the bug
comes back.
Bug comes back, and the next thing you're thinking, I could also do something here, and this problem is bugging me, and nobody's fixing it the way I want it fixed. And I think that's the people may call it serial entrepreneurship, but I think it's serial nitpicking. That's what it is.
You like being punished.
You like nitpicking. You're like, why can't it be like this? Because it's like this, and I don't like this.
And I
want it like
fix
this.
it.
And so I think we can do something about that. Yeah.
Awesome. I think switching over to, thanks for indulging us on the Twiga stuff. Switching over to EV. As mentioned, it's been pushed as the new way to, everything climate, everything electric vehicles. And I often have like very many questions about it. First of all, it's just like, is it too soon? Is it too soon to...
In
Kenya.
In Kenya, especially Kenya.
I'll give some realism with that. First of all, just to give context, my knowledge and my domain knowledge here is largely around electric buses. So I don't want to judge someone wants to buy a Tesla or the impact of that or people who have electric bikes, because I think there's value in all those, but I can't call myself an expert in terms of the economics of that. But with the electric buses, the thing that people may not realize that it's early. It does take time. The internal combustion engine has been around since somewhere in 1910 or something like that. So it's been around for over a century. The electric motor, although there have been attempts to make electric vehicles over the years, but only as a financial product, as a commercially viable product, has only been around for a few decades. And so, and Tesla is the biggest example of that. And so the reality is that there's a lot of development that needs to happen with electric vehicles. And I wouldn't discount it as a potential for the future, but yes, I would say still early days. And I think that's what makes it exciting as well. Is that it's early. If you get in early and hopefully you're successful, you could be next Ford or the next General Motors. I guess that's a bet.
So for the person who wants to run a transport business today, a diesel-powered bus and an electric bus.
So
you're told, advise him what
to pick.
You guys are putting me on the spot. No. I think the economics in the short term still favors diesel buses. They're far less costly to buy. The cost of capital is much lower. And of course, electric buses come with a lot of other implications. Things like where to charge them. You need that infrastructure, the network, and so on. So I wouldn't tell your Wangyo I wouldn't sit there and tell them, put your eggs now into the electric bus basket. I would tell them start to trial and test and figure it out, because their feedback is valuable to the people who are doing the manufacturing. And the few people who are doing that I think are doing interesting stuff. I think one is Rome, that you might know about. Basigo is another one that are doing this. And I know founders in both of those companies because I had to know who these people were. We're all very impressive people and trying to do something that is very, very challenging in a very challenging market as well. But of course, it's going to take time, and it's not, the economics of it is still up in the air, but I think it's going to improve over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you had to put a number on it, what's the time? Is it 10 years, 20 years? Next year, when Ruto is in government?
No, I think the thing is, it's hard to tell because the reality of technology is that it doesn't follow a linear progression. So the biggest cost factor for buses is the cost of the battery.
Yeah.
Right. That's like 40% to 60%, depending on the kind of bus you're buying, of the cost of the bus, and that the cost overall of the bus needs to go down quite significantly. Chris knows. So the thing is, you want to bring down the cost of the bus over time to make it viable. And this goes to the question you asked me: are people willing to pay more in fares? The reality is, the average Kenyan is spending something like 10% of their income on fare. Right? So if that's public transport, if you compare that to like New York, they're spending somewhere like 2% of their income on fare. And so it's a very vast, between 1% and 2%. So there's a very big difference, an order of magnitude, in terms of relative to my income, what am I paying on fares? So Kenyans would be very price sensitive to an increase in fares. So the challenge is not trying to get more out of the commuter. It's more trying to get your bus to cost lower and trying to operate it at a much lower cost. And that's really where the challenge is.
Okay.
And so I can't say 10 years. I think, who knows what the leaps in technology are
the
going
battery
to be.
technology needs to become cheaper, or something new comes up. Lithium ion.
I think there are a number of things. I would say the cost of the battery needs to go down. But what contributes to the battery cost going down? Or the cost of the unit. I think there's tax incentives. I think one of the things that maybe I stand alone in saying this, but one of the most annoying things about Kenya in terms of regulation is the huge amount of duties we charge to vehicles. There is this almost like punitive attitude towards vehicle ownership, and vehicle ownership relative to population in Kenya is very low. And a vehicle is, in my view, the reason why I was very passionate about starting Exodus is transportation it may not be one of the three basic needs, but it is the link to all three. But particularly to shelter and food, right? They're really, really important is transportation. The cost of transportation is a big function of the cost of living. And the big challenge I've seen is that when you have very high duties on vehicles, they become unaffordable for people. And it should be easy for if you've lived in a advanced society, public transport is so commonplace, and even motor vehicle ownership is so common that plumbers are driving around their own cars, and so we are inhibiting people from doing jobs because we want to get a bit extra on duties. It's quite ridiculous, but that's the situation.
So even if the battery cost goes down and our duties are still high,
yeah, it's still going to be too expensive. I think there's been talk now of reducing the cost of duties on EVs.
Yeah.
So I think that's going in a positive direction. But I would just, I mean, I'm a radical on this. I would just,
the president
abolish
the
this.
president was driving an EV.
Yeah.
That was the
absolutely.
first time and last time we ever saw you driving that thing.
Yes.
I think the thing is, I mean, of course, it's a balance, and
Yeah.
and you know, we know where the situation is with our country now. I mean, there's a need for the government to collect revenue, and that's becoming very important. So it's not happening at the right time. But the problem is, if you want to build a good EV industry, I think the two things. One is it has to be cheap, that people can use it.
Yeah.
And two, then you need that facilitates manufacturing, because ultimately the more people are using it domestically, the easier it is to start factories and start getting
But
things
electricity
manufactured.
prices are also going.
So yeah, so how does that work out? It's exactly the electricity prices, and then I'm being told,
Yeah, so it's and the funny thing about that is it's the cost of energy is a big issue, but it's a global issue as well. There's a lot of inflation in cost of energy, but one thing that we're very lucky with as Kenya is we have a lot of natural resources. So we have a lot of geothermal. I don't know if you guys know, but I think last stat I saw, Kenyan, which does geothermal, they release up to 30% of their potential energy into the air.
Whoa.
They release.
Because they can't tap it?
No, because they tap it, but they can't use it because we don't consume enough electricity.
Okay.
For their generation capacity is above our consumption.
That's a whole different, because that's where you still have the thermal generators running, yet you still have excess capacity on geo and other. So then you're supposed to switch off the.
Well, it's technically that would be, but there's technical reasons why that isn't the case.
Yeah.
But broader point there is that we would all benefit if obviously if you made EVs affordable and easy, then you would take out that capacity, that surplus capacity, and it would be absorbed in
Kenyan
transport.
plan to put in charging. I think they applied to get charging ports.
I don't know where that's gone, how far that's gone, but there's I mean there are a lot of issues with that. I think the broader one is mandates. So you have Kenya Power, they're supposed to be a distributor. Kenyan is supposed to be a generator. So they have. I think they're navigating that fine line and figuring out how to collaborate and cooperate between the two entities. So that also is a factor. But yeah, I know that they have plans. I think those are exciting plans. But I've not been following it too closely. I can't really comment. I'm not sure if they've gone far with it.
I think what would be great, like for example, the microgrid in Muranga, where you have people generating their own power. Yeah, you just put on some charging ports so that you don't have to tap into the national grid. If you have some generation capacity within an area, let's say northern Kenya, some solar plant, some hydro in Muranga, and I'm quite sure that I think when I was there, according to the calculations given, their power is way cheaper than what they was getting from.
Power costs are driven a lot by distribution.
Yeah, also the more local.
So the biggest challenge of power is if you want to lower it, you want people to use it. And so I think the logic of especially electric vehicles now is who is the biggest off-taker of power outside of households and factories. And what people don't know is that if you actually do it in dollar values, the cost of energy for transportation is significantly larger than the cost of factories and the cost of households in aggregate. So, in other words, the amount of fuel we consume just to power up vehicles is far more in value than the amount we spend on households and factories. So I think the logic that people are applying is, if we encourage EV, then we now have this massive off-taker of energy that even rivals factories and households.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Or we set up a power plant, nuclear power plant.
I think we're too far from that, but it's not impossible. I think with time, those are also possible options.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So where is Exodus now? Are you guys still? Would you say you're still in the EV game, or you just have buses running?
We are agnostic on EV, and we have to be because the reality is we want to have as many customers as possible. So we can't be dictating what kind of vehicle our operators use because we are here to facilitate the operators. We're not here to actually work directly with customers. When we did it, we did that deliberately to, what do you call it is embrace the suck. That's the mindset you need to have when you run a startup is what sucks. So take that thing that sucks and do it. And so embrace the suck. So we did it so that when we speak to any of these SACCOs, we're not speaking as if we're not being prescriptive. We are empathetic. We know you went through this because we went through it. And now this is why our solution works. So we don't want to tell someone, hey, you need to use EV because we know the costs associated with it. And at the same time, but if you want to do it, we do have the experience of how to help you with setting that up.
But if you've gotten some money from climate change activists and organizations and say like, hey, we want to run clean energy transport in
absolutely. So I'll address your skepticism. No, I think there's this. I mean, of course, look, the reality is that with any of these movements, you're always going to have people who are more evangelistic. They're like a revivalist ministry church, and then you have people are a bit more practical and so on. And so I think the reality is even with climate change and all these initiatives, there are people who understand it a bit more, in a more pragmatic sense. And there are people, of course, who, for them it's they hear it's carbon credits and all these things, start ringing in their heads. So it's a challenging one because you have to navigate that environment. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, it's not about saying that's nonsensical from my end. It's more saying, okay, I understand why you think it's important, but now what are the practical steps to make it possible? So we can address climate change and so on. I'm not a climate skeptic. I wouldn't put myself in that category, but I would say I'm more of, I'm skeptical about all the methods being used to combat it. And so it's more about, that's a good battle of ideas. And we debate which is going to make the most sense over time, and that's fine.
But I like the idea, say like the practical. Implication of it, because I think a good example is Germany, which I think they closed down their nuclear power plant and all the coal, power generation using coal, until Russia cut off their gas. And now like it's practical to control. We control our own coal. So it is practical to use our own coal to power our homes, than rely on an external aggressive.
I think that's that, and you can take. I mean, that's a great example, but that's also just reflects the that's more of a political question around geopolitics, because who knew that energy markets could be weaponized? So if your assumption was that the energy markets broadly were going to be kumbaya and everyone is going to be fine, then your assumption was that then let's go to more clean energies and so on. But of course, what has happened. I think they have good lessons from that. But I think for the likes of Germany and in Europe, those are lessons for them. For us, our abundance of energy is actually renewable. So we don't even need climate evangelism. It's actually just practical for us to use geo because it's there. Geothermal is there. So let's just use what we have.
Or a balance. Some things will still run on fossil fuels. Some things will run on clean energy.
Agreed.
Other than saying cut off
Yeah, agreed. And this goes back to the question about like regulations and so on. A radical view for me would be zero rate all taxes on vehicles, just because one of the big contributors to emissions is poor engines.
Yeah.
And so when you have like new buses now have Euro 5, Euro 4 engines that are far more efficient in terms of burning fuel, but they're expensive because of duties. So it's about, how do you balance policy? And I think that's a very difficult conversation. There's many other elements.
If I'm correct, I think I read that it's methane from cows that's the highest contributor to greenhouse gases, and that's why.
So you should stop eating beef.
Yes, tell us to become vegans.
Yes. I've had the argument. I mean,
and we are like the Maasais are busy with their cows.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, all those conversations, they're very interesting conversations. But what ends up happening is, of course, you have your ideal situation, and then it's your ideas run into reality. So maybe it's easy for someone to say, I'm going to quit eating meat personally because I think that's good for the environment.
Yeah.
Then someone says, well, let's take it a step further and ban or tax it high and so on.
Yeah.
And then you wake up one day and beef farmers somewhere, the industry is collapsing, and then you start to see jobs going, and then all of a sudden, those are the trade-offs that start to emerge. So policy issues are always complex. Politicians are usually better placed to because they know how to balance interests. But yeah, it's always going to end up that way.
So an entrepreneur steps in and says, okay, in this climate change environment, how do I make money?
How do you make money?
Yeah.
Get customers to pay you for something.
Sell EV buses.
No, I think there's two things. You're right. I get where you're going with this.
Yeah.
It's a mischievous question. It's a mischievous question, and I know what you're trying to get at. The comment you're making is how you're trying to imply, where do entrepreneurs actually raise money, right? And let's not confuse two things. I think one is fundraising, which entrepreneurs have to do.
Yes.
And then there's building a product that customers are willing to pay for, right, which is the other thing. I think now, especially in this market, people are biasing more towards, my source of funds is my customer.
Yeah.
So I need to get my customer to pay for it. And then, if someone sees value in what I'm doing in terms of the broader policy goals and wants to support me, then I'm happy to raise capital from them.
Yeah.
And I think now it's just more of a precedent thing. It's like, okay, my customers are paying for me to operate my business, so I'm running off my profits. And then on the other hand, there's a climate fund somewhere that likes what I'm doing, and then they want to support me. So that's the entrepreneur. I mean, I would never put it this way. If I know it's going to sound controversial, but if someone came to me and told me, you're running this business and we're a climate fund and we want to give you funds to help you grow your business, I wouldn't dismiss that offhand. Because if it's money that's not going to dilute from an equity standpoint, why would I refuse to take the money?
Exactly.
So you have to be, a little bit, pragmatic.
I think that's okay. I think we had some other previous discussions about like those growth companies where you pump in money. Perhaps you're still finding product market fit.
Yeah.
And at some point, when the reality hits, you realize you don't have enough customers, you don't have a good product. Other than how we call the Mwindi business, who sets up a small kiosk
and makes money.
And makes money
from day one.
and grows slowly. And he probably hand it over to his son. And then after 30 years, it's like, I'll give you an example like Textbook Center. It's been growing. I knew it ever since I was like in primary school. It's
fair question. It's a fair question.
Yeah. So I think the point is like there is money to exponential growth. And then there is like getting money from your customer and growing it.
I mean, ideally, you want to have a mix of both. That would be a great business. That would be what people call a unicorn, right? That's your Facebook, your Googles. On one hand, they're charging advertisers a large amount of money to run the business, but their users just keep growing regardless. And so you have that's one option. But the other one that what happens is, as you're trying to get product market fit, the ideal scenario is to a little bit be more like the Muhindi. To really bootstrap, because it focuses the mind. What does my customer actually want, and what are they willing to pay for? But in reality, it's hard to do that when there's a surplus of capital available. It's easy to rationalize raising around and putting money in your company and having that comfort, because at the end of the day, the challenge for the entrepreneur or the founder is, I'm convincing people to come on this journey with me, to work for my company and build this company. I want to give them the best possible chance of success. And capital is one of those advantages. So I'm not going to turn away from capital, but how do you accept it, but still maintain that mindset that, I want to make money from my customer. So that's really the challenging balance for any founder. It's hard. It's not like everybody's an angel, right? When we talked about these things, but in reality, if someone comes with a fairly large offer for funds, yes, you're going to be tempted to take
money. Money is tempting.
Because it's an advantage. You can't deny it.
But just do you think how the capital is deployed is almost what exclusively matters?
Absolutely.
Because you can say like all the startups that are sort of falling or are the ones that had quite some capital, and that's the first question most people ask. How did the X raise?
I see your point, and there's a look. There's no good answer, right? And I don't want to say something that would. Look, I know many people who were in these companies, who founded these companies. Hindsight is 2020. They could probably come in here and give you, if they were willing to be vulnerable, give you very, very, they'll be the hardest critics of themselves, of the things that they did wrong. The reality, though, is that, when you're in that situation, you want to raise capital because it's not because you're greedy, it's because you want to give yourself an advantage. And capital is, if someone raises, think of it like an arms race, you know. So someone raises $10 million, and I raise 15. So now, it's the reason those articles appear in TechCrunch. It's like, so you raised 10. Sasa, then you're telling them to put on the ground. Sasa. So it's more. It can create irrationality, obviously, and exuberance. But that is not the point I try to make to people. Is it's not unique to our situation in Kenya. It has happened in markets that you would think are even far more mature, with far better investors in terms of experience. And the mistakes still happen. So it's hindsight is always 2020. Is my view.
Awesome.
Okay.
And how's been your? From what it sounds, you're kind of doing a combination of bootstrapping and trying to raise capital. How's that going?
So our mindset is, our philosophy is to have paying customers. That's for us is the most critical thing. We are not in the market to fundraise yet. We haven't started that process, and for us there's a number of reasons why. I think the major one is we want to have the confidence that our paying customers are, what people call unit economics. It's paying for everything. And so that has been we're focused more on quality. It's the quality of our revenue, the quality of the money we make, rather than just the sum total. So I think that is just a prudent approach. There's no major hurry. We're not trying to be
Disrupt.
we're not trying to do that, and I think that's just how we are wired.
Yeah.
The founding team is mentally, things like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, look, I mean, when we do raise, at some point we will have to. The mindset for us is that we're raising to have an advantage. So we're not raising so that we can be sitting ducks. We're raising so that we can use capital as an advantage. So our mindset is that's the mentality. Yeah.
Good. It's really good to hear. I think, as I mentioned, there's not many like African founders in this space. And I completely understand that it's a very new, like EV is very new to this market. What are you thinking through how to bring the skills like in Kenya?
Or in terms of founders generally, or
Yeah, founders, companies, like you mentioned a few like Bastigo, Rome,
they're more well
they are more foreign.
it's I have a view on this that is going to
Let me listen to this.
to hurt some feelings. Look, I think there are many ways to get into the startup ecosystem. So, for example, for us, not just me and a couple of friends, we have invested in startups. I'm proud to say that there's some that we've invested in that have ended up in Y Combinator, for example. And we invest and we support them because we have the experience, both the things that we did right and the things we did wrong.
Yep.
So you just sitting and someone starts talking like, okay, stop. that is not going to. That is not prudent. And sometimes we've done that because there's a growing ecosystem of founders that are local. The thing that I think what people may sometimes when they see the foreign element, the way I try and picture it is it's like thinking in analogies.
Okay.
So thinking in analogies, he knows this because statistics is you're biased towards past performance, right?
Yeah.
So an investor will always have an analogy in their mind of what an ideal startup founder looks like, and not just in terms of black or white. I'm talking about the profile of the person.
Yeah.
And if you look at, for example, the US, you can see some of the funny ones that ended up with disasters.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah.
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
And all of that is because of sort of an analogous sort of thinking. He reminds me of
Steve Jobs.
He reminds me of Bill Gates, and it's normal.
Yeah.
And everybody does it.
Yeah.
Prejudice is part of life because we all have stereotypes.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, the hardest thing for a person to do is dispense with analogous thinking, because the whole point is that there will not be another Steve Jobs. That's why he was incredibly successful, because he was uncommon amongst uncommon people.
Yeah.
And the same with Bill Gates, and the same with Travis Kalanick or any of these other entrepreneurs. And so you're trying to look for what's uncommon or what's common. But it's hard to do that because there's still a formula you're going to use. And so what initially with the first batch of founders is you saw a lot of analogous thinking. But there are many successful companies that were a product of that. And then there were others that weren't so successful. But when some companies are unsuccessful, people point to those unsuccessful companies and say, well, you see, they just, they funded this white guy and this white guy didn't do well. Failing to point out all the other white guys that actually did very well. And I can point, and I don't want to make it a racial issue, but I know very impressive people who happen to not be black, who've run companies in Kenya and done very well.
Okay.
And I think that's just legitimate. They've done a good job. So the way we need to think about it, I think the way I think about it is, what new analogies can we build?
Okay.
So the reason I invest in founders is, first of all, I'm trying to see what is this, what makes for a good founder in a Kenyan context.
Patterns.
So that I can start pattern matching.
What makes
This guy, when we meet guys like this, they tend to be quite successful.
Okay.
And so it's only by building an analogy of our own that can rival that. And so it's more doing that. And so I think we're in that process now. We're in the second stage now where we have, when I give people the context of when I started in Twiga, those were very different days. If you raised $150,000, you are in business daily. It was a whole feature. Now, if you join, if you are a startup founder now, there's expectations to raise significantly more, and you need analogies to do that. And so we're trying to help the new age of founders, successful founders, to arise, and so then investors can see, okay, Kenyans can actually build world-class businesses.
So you're also a VC?
I wouldn't say so, but I would say more, me and a couple of friends, we tend to look at ourselves more as like, I would say, thinking about it more like a venture studio. So helping people build companies.
Okay.
But we've been fortunate that we've also met people who have built companies or are building companies, and they're successful. And all we're doing is just giving them whatever tactical or strategic support. Like, okay, you need someone who has this skill. I happen to know someone. I'll put you guys in touch. Make it happen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what, if you don't mind sharing, what a few startups that you've actually invested in, if you don't mind? I'm always interested to know.
So I will. I mean, they're on my LinkedIn, so it's not a secret. Some are stealth, so they're not there.
Yeah.
But I can name two.
Okay,
One
awesome.
is Fingo, which is a financial technology company.
Oh.
If you've used Fingo.
No, I know the founder was at iHub. It was
Yeah. Which is that, Ian or Kiro?
they were twins. I couldn't tell the difference, but one of them used to work at
I have
iHub.
strong opinions about Fingo, but I'll keep it to myself.
And then we have another one called Eden Care as well.
What?
Eden Care.
I think I've seen that one. Is that the one? What's
Health insurance.
Yeah. For
So-
diaspora or something like that?
No. It's just to enable people to have to enable people, basically running a far more efficient way for you to get a health insurance cover.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and so they're also doing well.
That's good.
And so so I think when I think of some of these companies, some are stealth, I can't mention.
Yeah, no worries. Completely understand.
The people who are building them would kill me if I revealed what they're doing. But yeah, we support these companies, and I do that with two friends, Mahia, John, who you might know, and Kane. Both of us we try and be as helpful as we can.
We call that the Twiga Mafia. So
It's not a mafia. It's not a mafia. No one has been threatened.
there is like the PayPal Mafia, where the founding
that's
team
what
at
you're
PayPal, they left and built other great
companies.
I think Elon Musk was part of it too.
And then David Sachs and Reid Hoffman or
Yes.
Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear what you're
Is
saying.
that those the patterns we're seeing here?
The Twiga, but I love it because
For sure.
actually, people complain a lot, and like if we would like more money to go into startups and everything, we have to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
That's why you didn't decide to go and live in a yacht in Mwatela.
No, it's look, it's early days.
Yeah.
We I wouldn't say we're that. We have to prove ourselves.
Yeah.
Of course.
But we try to be as I look at it more as we're trying to be as supportive as we can.
Yeah.
It's hard enough as it is. When we started Twiga, my mentor was American. There was no one who had run a company that was doing what we were doing to the scale that we were doing it,
Yeah.
at the pace at which we were growing,
Okay.
with the kind of technology we're trying to deploy that was in Kenya.
Okay.
So I
Clear.
had to go and look for it elsewhere. And very lucky that I was able to do that. The guy was, I'll even give him a shout out, it's called Pablo.
Pablo.
Hi, Pablo.
So further encouragement about this mafia reference.
I know his name is Pablo.
He's called Pablo, and Pablo was a great guy, and he's run a few. I'm not going to mention the companies, but some major companies in the US in terms of running their operations and so on.
Awesome.
So I had to.
Tap into that.
So why not help other people now?
Yeah, makes sense. Give back. Do you have any questions?
No, I was still ruminating around the idea because I think this is a great thing. Part of why people fail is because they don't know what they're doing.
I would say failure is to be frank, it's not the 80% of the things you know. It's the 20% of really important things that you don't know.
Yeah.
And so the challenge at times with running a company, and just maybe parting shot, is the reason why we are doing what we're doing is it's not about the 80% we know the founders know.
Yeah.
Right? So you know your market, you know your customers, it's that 20% mistake that has an 80% outcome
That will hit you.
that when we are having a conversation, I can red flag that and say that potentially could be an issue for you.
Yeah.
And so it's, how can I help with that? Because we know, and we know what is the potential nuclear bomb that could blow up in your company, or we have experience with what those could be. So a lot of times you could make 80% of the time you'll make a lot of mistakes building a company. I have my war stories, and we made a lot of errors, but nothing that was terminal.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of it was skipping over all the potential landmines whilst making a lot of other smaller mistakes. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. And I think there's a great quote to top that. It's Nassim Taleb, which I know you like him too.
Hey, okay.
Very cool guy. Yeah.
Very cool guy.
Yeah.
He says a chef or somebody that's going to make a lot of mistakes, like a little bit of salt here, too much of pepper here, but he'll always be right. But a thief will make a mistake one day and is dead.
Precisely.
Yeah, and he uses that as an analogy for risk. And it's the same thing, like there is like something which if you get it wrong, it sinks you. So he says make mistakes on things that won't sink you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the journey of being a startup founder. I think is being comfortable with a lot of errors, and then being extremely paranoid about major mistakes.
Yeah.
So you have one part of your brain that is thinking about the day zero event that could happen in your company.
Yeah.
The thing that will destroy your company.
Yeah.
And then you have, Jeff Bezos describes it this way. He says there's two-way doors and there's one-way doors. Right? So a two-way door is you make a mistake, but you can reverse.
Yeah.
You can walk through the door and you can walk back. And your one-way door is you enter there, that's it.
Yeah.
And you go with it. So
Yeah.
I think that the big thing for startups is when you appraise something as this is a one-way door, it could actually destroy my company. Then you have to do the work to really make sure that you're making the right decision. And if it's a two-way door, you're pragmatic and you're like, well, if it fails, that's a few $1,000s of loss, and we'll move on. We'll survive that. But $10 million of loss, no.
Yeah.
We need to do the work.
Yeah, fair enough. Makes sense. So I guess just closing it off, where do you see Exodus going?
Let me not assume to be a prophet, but
You don't know.
I would say
It's a tough question.
but I would say, I don't want to sound too evangelical, but the thing is we want to be the default software for all transport companies in the next 10 years across Africa, because we've built a product that is so quality that everyone who wants to operate a transport business, public transport, in freight and so on, will naturally they'll devote themselves to this product because we've devoted ourselves to making a good quality product. So that's why I see us in.
And what's the product exactly? Just
software. Software as a service. So basically,
say I'm a bus operator and I come to you guys.
So everything you want to do in your bus operation can be run through the software. If you look at our public transport industry, the biggest headache is just the enormous amount of paperwork and the enormous amount of work you have to do. I don't know if you ever dealt with a company with a lot of customers, the customer relations work you have to do.
Okay, so
managing a very, very fragmented business in a highly centralized way, coherently, from everything from your finance to your operations to your HR, all within one system.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, that's what we want to do.
Awesome, cool. I know you gave your parting shot, but any last parting shot?
Okay.
Do you have any?
Last parting shot? No, thank you guys for hosting us, for hosting me. And I think for it's in the startup ecosystem right now. There is an almost a deep sadness because of what has happened over the last few months, and everyone is terrified. And my parting shot is that it'll be very dark, but when we come out of this, I'm very excited about the kind of companies that are going to come out of this. I think it's going to be phenomenal companies.
I am with you on that one.
That's what makes me. That's what I wake up to every day. Is I can't wait to see what great companies come out of this.
As Warren Buffett says,
yes.
It's when the tide goes away. That's when
you'll see who's swimming naked.
Once the darkness passes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So there you have it. That was a great conversation. I think we talked about a lot, EV, startups, analogies. But yeah, check out Exodus and make sure to leave a comment and subscribe. Ciao.
Thank you.
Peace out.
Cheers.
9 to 5 has good vibes, but 9 to 5 with Ngari has